Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I am here to talk about all of the series I'm in the middle of reading. Firstly, excuse my voice. I'm quite sick at the moment. I have COVID, which I know that nobody really cares about anymore, no one's testing for, but I work with quite a lot of older people, so yeah, I don't really want to be giving people COVID. So nobody really wants me in the office just now. Also, I'm moving house in the next couple of days, and Sky has disconnected my internet. They always do this where you need to have like a couple of days with no internet. So yeah, that was yesterday and today, the 2 days I've been off sick. So yeah, even though I'm not feeling well, I'm just trying to do something that feels a little bit more productive than just sitting staring into space or reading, but like I don't have that much brain power right now for reading. Also, as I said, I'm in the middle of moving, so I've started unpacking my bookcase, so please ignore the mess behind me. It's not the ideal time to be moving when I'm not feeling well, and my boyfriend's gone away for a couple of days for work, and so the idea was that after I finish work I would be packing the house, but that's not really happened, so I'm like slowly trying to do little bits and pieces. Anyway, when I was going to make this video, I was going to make it sort of like a 3-in-1 video. I was going to talk about my favourite book series, the series I was in the middle of, and then the series I'm looking forward to getting to. And I really thought, because I don't really read a lot of fantasy or sci-fi, which tend to be the books that are series, I thought I would have like 4 series to talk about that I was in the middle of. But then when I actually looked, I have 28, which is crazy because I really didn't think that there were that many series that I'd started reading. A lot of these are a bit kind of looser series, like you don't really need to read them all. But yeah, I thought I would talk you through them, and then I'll do a separate video where I talk about my favourite series and the ones I'm looking forward to getting to, because otherwise I think we'll be here for a very long time. So I'm going to try and order these from like the series that I'm most likely to finish to the ones that I'm least likely to pick up again. There are some that I already own the next book for, so like I'll definitely be getting to them, and there are others that, well, some didn't even realise were a series. Others like I read years ago and probably wouldn't pick back up, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about them all here. Also, just please excuse the fact that like out of the books I own, none of them are matching editions. I know that'll annoy a lot of people if you like collecting all of the same editions of books. Like that's not me. I just pick up books wherever I find them. So yeah, I think there should be one series where all the editions are the same, so do please excuse that. So the first series that I'm definitely going to be finishing, and hopefully this year, is A Dance to the Music of Time. I've talked about this in a couple of videos, but I started this series right at the very end of last year. So I read the first book, A Question of Upbringing, in right at the end of December, and then I've read the next 7 in the series throughout the course of this year so far. So I have 4 books left, so I'm hoping to get to them before the end of the year. These are all very short books. This sort of follows a group of characters throughout the course of about 50 years. The main character, Nick Jenkins, I think is sort of like a version of the author. He is an author. He was sort of alive around the same time as the author, about the same age as the author. And you follow him from sort of high school up until, I'm assuming, towards the end of his life. The point I'm at just now in book 9, it's during World War II. There have now been a couple of books during World War II. So yeah, I've read the first one, A Question of Upbringing. The second one is A Buyer's Market, which I can't find. I don't know if I've already packed it. I thought I'd picked them all out, but maybe not. The third one's The Acceptance World. Fourth one, At Lady Molly's. Fifth one, Casanova's Chinese Restaurant. Number 6, The Kindly Ones. Number 7, The Valley of Bones. Number 8, The Soldier's Art. Number 9, The Military Philosophers. Number 10, Books Do Furnish a Room. Number 11, Temporary Kings. And number 12, Hearing Secret Harmonies. I quite like some of the covers of these ones. As I say, I just like ordered most of them online secondhand, and sometimes you don't actually know what edition they're going to send you. But yeah, I've been really enjoying this series so far. It's very gossipy, it's very high society, characters sort of coming in and out, lots of party scenes. It's a good time. It's almost like a comfort read at this point, where I pick it up and I know all of the characters. They're all characters I've met from previous books, so yeah, I'm just like really enjoying this series. Next is another series that I have read 2 out of the 3 books, and I own the 3rd book. It's on my physical TBR of books that I've owned since before the start of the year, so I will definitely be reading it this year. And that's Hilary Mantel's Thomas Cromwell trilogy. So I read book 1, Wolf Hall, wow, that's shiny, back in 2020. And then I went on and read quite close after Bring Up the Bodies in 2020 as well. And I would say that I enjoyed Bring Up the Bodies more than Wolf Hall. And then I bought in like 2021, just after it had come out in paperback, The Mirror and the Light, which is the 3rd and final book. This is the largest book by quite a chunk. Like, that's the 2nd book, that's the 3rd book. So that's kind of what put me off. And then also now so much time has passed that I'm worried I'm not going to be able to remember the characters. This series does not help you out at all. I was quite happy that I read the first 2 so close together, because there are a lot of characters that come in and out that are not really introduced. You need to try and remember how people are related to each other. I don't know loads about Tudor England. Like, I know enough about Henry VIII, but not like all of the courtiers and, you know, dukes and stuff. So it was taking quite a lot of brain power to remember who was who. So I think I might need to go and read a recap before I start on this book. But I think I will really like it. I really like the character of Thomas Cromwell that she's created. And yeah, I was enjoying all of the intrigue and the courtly drama. And just like, it's so long and it's kind of put me off picking it up. But I will definitely finish this year. Next is, well, it's sort of a series, this, but it's technically one book split up into 5 volumes, and that's The Story of the Stone by Xueqin. I might be saying that completely wrong. And this is translated from the, it doesn't say whether it's, I think it's Mandarin, by David Hawkes, and I read the first volume of this book last year, and then I ordered the 2nd volume and I've not picked it up. So this is one of the sort of classic Chinese novels, The Story of the Stone. It's also called The Dream of Red Mansions. That might not be right, but something like that. This is basically a story about a very rich sort of noble Chinese family. I think it's about their decline. I've not got to that bit yet, but when I read the introduction to the first book, it kind of spoils the whole thing. But that's not a spoiler, like, that is what it's about. The first book I really enjoyed, but this is kind of like nothing I've ever read before. It wasn't difficult to get through, it's just that the sort of Chinese classics are very different. So there are like fairies in this, but apart from that, apart from the sort of fairy aspect, it is very like, it's almost gossipy. There are lots of different members of the family that you sort of go between. The main character is a young boy who's going to be sort of the heir to the family throne, I guess. And 2 of his female friends, one of them is, I think, his cousin, and the other one is like a daughter of a maid. It's sort of phases in my mind a little bit. And I think these are 2 are going to sort of want to become his love interests. I really liked a lot of the scenes where it was just sort of people talking to each other. There's one bit where someone comes to visit who's very important, and this young boy has to go through the garden of the house and write a like short poem for each plant or like each monument that he passes. And so there's this whole bit of like him reciting poetry and then being like, yes, that's good, or no, that's not very good. Yeah, I think like you just need to go along with this one. I don't know why I've not picked up the next book, but I will get to it soon. Then another book that's sort of just one book in multiple volumes is Septology by Fosse. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year, and I had read The Other Name, which is the first volumes 1 and 2 of his Septology. So yeah, it's kind of confusing because there are 7 volumes, but at least in the UK, Fitzcarraldo editions have published it in 3 volumes. So there's 1 and 2, and then I've got 3 to 5 as well. And then I guess 6 and 7 are the 3rd one. I don't own that one yet. I picked this one up when I think it was the last volume was shortlisted for the Booker International, and I was like, well, I'm not going to pick up the last volume, so I picked up the first one, and this was quite depressing and sort of a bit surrealist. At the time, I didn't like fall in love with it. It was quite a tricky read. is sort of told almost stream of consciousness style. It's about a man and sort of his doppelganger, but they know each other. One of them is an alcoholic, the other one's a painter, and it's sort of a reflection of the one that's the painter one. You're in his head for most of it. He's sort of reflecting back in his childhood, but he keeps talking about his double, that he's like going to go and visit him. So like they know each other, they have a relationship, but they are sort of the same person. Bit bizarre, but I obviously liked it enough because then I did pick up the next one, I Is Another, but I just haven't got to it because it was quite tricky. This one is also, it doesn't look that long, but I think it is, oh no it's not, it's like 300 pages. So this is also a book that I've owned since before the start of the year, so I will get to it soon. I've just not prioritised it yet. The next one is an autobiography series. I don't know if this has a name, but I read Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter by Simone de Beauvoir. She has split up her autobiography into 4 volumes, so I read the first one, which was quite nice and short. Really enjoyed it. This is sort of her memoir of growing up and her relationship that starts with Sartre when she goes to university. It's very like inner monologue-y, like some of the stuff I think, could you remember that from being a child? Probably not, but like it was very interesting. It's very much about how she develops mentally, how her philosophies change as she grows up. So I enjoyed this. I then ordered the second one, and it's a lot bigger, which I didn't realise when I ordered it. So it's over 600 pages, and that's the prime of life. So again, I do own it, so I will get to it soon. I did really enjoy the first one. It's just long, so we'll see. And the next one, which is kind of classed as a separate series from the first book, but I'm going to count it as the same because it's the same characters, and that's the Leant Trilogy by Olivia. The first trilogy is called the Balkan Trilogy, and those books were published in 3 separate novels. I just read it in one bind up, and I'm assuming the same with this, but it does follow on directly from the Balkan Trilogy, so I'm kind of counting this as a series I've not finished. This follows a couple during the war. The man is an English teacher at school. They start off in Romania, they then move to Greece, and then at this point they're in the Levant, so they go to Egypt, Jerusalem and Syria. I think it's going to be very interesting. I really enjoyed the first trilogy. I did find it quite sad at points. It is sort of about the horrors of war and about how war, at least the Second World War, seems to creep up on you no matter where you go to try to avoid it. Also about the different points that people will want to try and escape. So for the woman in this, Harriet, she is quite keen to get away, but the man, Guy, I think his name is, because he is working as a school teacher, even though he's at the point where no one is turning up to his classes because you're in the middle of a war, he's very principled and he thinks that he's there to do a job and he will not leave. So it's sort of about the tensions in their relationship that build from that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Will definitely read this. This is also one of the ones that I've owned since before the start of the year, so I will definitely get to it. And then the last of the ones where I own another book in the series is Émile Zola's The Gormenghast series. I have only read the first one, which is called The Fortune of the Rugons. It was a library copy. I don't have it anymore. And I thought it was okay. I didn't love it. However, there are like 20 books in this series, and Brandon Taylor wrote this really long article for, I think, for the London Review of Books or the New York Review of Books, where he had read them all over the last couple of years, and he was sort of talking about how they relate to current society now. And it made me really, really want to read them. However, these are sort of books where there is a recommended reading order, but I don't think it hugely matters. So I thought what might be a good idea was to pick up a book out of the series that sounded the most appealing to me in terms of subject matter, to see if I could get into it. And then I can go back and read the other ones, because The Fortune of the Rugons was sort of set in a small village, and it was about this family and sort of about them trying to become rich, and then there's a bit of political intrigue and it becomes quite dramatic towards the end. And this one, The Lady's Paradise, which is the next one I've picked up, is set in a modern department store in late 19th century Paris. That sounds more interesting to me, like shopping. Sort of the politics of running a department store. It sounds more slice of lifey, less like dramatic. So I'm going to give this one a go and we'll see. And then next is a series that I didn't even realise was a series when I read the first 2 books and that's Ben Lerner's series. So I read Leaving the Atocha Station, which I think is actually the second one in the series, and then I read the Topeka School. So I think this is the third one in the series. This is a very loose series. Like when I looked in Goodreads, it's not even classed as a series, but the characters in these books are the same, which I didn't realise because I read them sort of a couple of years apart. And yeah, they're like, this one is about the character when he's at high school, and this one is about him when he's at university. So it's like not very obvious. And this one, he's in Madrid on a year abroad. This one is like about his family life. So yeah, if you've read them kind of far apart and you can't remember the character's name, like it's not obvious that they're about the same person, but they are. And the first book, which is 1004, I have been meaning to get to for a while because I really like Ben Lerner's writing, especially the Topeka School. This is sort of about a debating society at school, and I just really liked all of the different little segments it went into. Leaving the Atocha Station, yeah, it's about the student who's on his year abroad. He's not a very nice character, he's quite sort of detestable, but I really enjoyed his sort of little insights on life. If you've been to Madrid, like you'll be able to recognise all the places, which I really enjoyed. I will definitely pick up 1004, hopefully sooner rather than later. So yeah, that is a series that I will definitely finish soon. The next is one that I do want to get to. It's just a lot, and that's Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. I own volume 1 and I've also read volume 2. You know, you don't really need an introduction to what this is about. This is sort of a series of novels, but maybe you're meant to think it's autofictional as well, and the character's quite similar to Proust. This again was sort of originally published, I think, in 1 volume, or like it is 1 book that's just split into 7 volumes. I really like the first one. So the first one, you know, he's reflecting back on his childhood, and the whole thing is that he goes to his aunt's house and she gives him a madeleine, and it transports him back, the taste of that madeleine, to memories of when he was younger. And that sort of follows throughout the books. He's reflecting on lost time. You know, it's about memory, it's about the way that memory plays tricks on you, but it's also about a lot more than that. And the second one, which is In the Shadow of the Girls in Flower, might not be that, something like that, it sort of more goes into his crushes on random girls, which I was less interested in. I know that Jess over at Sunbeam's Jess has read maybe not all of them, but like that was her plan, to read all of them, and she started to like them less and less as the series went on. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but this is one of those books where I feel like you should have read. And I do really like his writing style. I guess I just worry that it's going to decline more. So I will pick up the 3rd book and then I'll sort of decide after that, I think. The next one's a very recent series I started. So I read Ngugi wa Thiong'o's memoir series. So I read the 1st book, which is Dreams at a Time of War, and then the 2nd book, In the House of the Interpreter. There are 4 books in this series. I will probably at least buy the next one and see how it goes. I really liked Dreams at a Time of War. This was sort of about his childhood, growing up in Kenya, about British colonial rule and how that affects his family life. And then In the House of the Interpreter is him when he goes to high school, and again about how at this point British colonial rule is causing him like serious issues. So it's very interesting from that point of view. I found the 2nd one a little bit too meandering for my liking. It didn't really feel very focused. It felt like at points he would be talking about the books he liked to read for ages, and then about football, and then it would go on to like about how his brother was in prison. And you're like, okay, well these are like quite different things, and they seem to be given the same weight in it, which I find a bit weird. But yeah, I'll definitely pick up the next one. I think he had a very interesting life. I want to read more of his fiction, and I think that understanding his life will help me to understand his fiction. So that's the plan. And the next is one that like I would kind of like to get to, but I'm probably not going to prioritise, and that's Yukio Mishima's Sea of Fertility tetralogy. So there are 5 books in this, and I've read the first 2. So the first one is Spring Snow, and I really like this one. This is about a young boy who's from quite a rich family, and about his friend from school who becomes really obsessed with the transmigration of the soul, basically reincarnation. And then it goes on from there. It's sort of a love story. I liked it. Like, I liked a lot of the writing. I liked a lot of the discussion about reincarnation. And this is going to be a theme for the rest of the series, I believe, because it seems like in the second book you meet this character again, but in a different incarnation. So the second book I liked a lot less. It's about samurais, and it really was going into a lot of detail about samurai honor. It was sort of about a rebellion, an uprising, and it was very action packed. I know that the third book I think is set in Thailand. So like I would like to pick them up, but I just really didn't like the second one very much. Maybe I'll just read the synopses of the other ones and then I can decide if they sound like they're my sort of thing. I don't think that you really need to read all of the books in this series in order. Like I guess once you understand the sort of incarnation theme, like maybe it doesn't matter so much. I'd say that apart from that aspect of it, there was nothing really linking the two books. Apart from like the main character, but he's not really a big part of the second book. It's sort of a standalone story with just that little bit linked. So we will see. The next one I'm really torn about. So I read Titus Grown by Mervyn Peake, and this is a trilogy. It's the Gormenghast trilogy. The second book is called Gormenghast, and this is sort of like a classic fantasy series. It's set in a very old medieval type castle, and you meet like a whole host of quite quirky, eccentric characters. It's sort of like the land that time forgot. There are all these ancient rituals that are still in place in the castle. It's very much sort of in a time capsule where the world around it is developing, but it's not. And you meet Titus Grown, who is in the first book a baby, so like he's not really the main character. I think he's going to grow up, and I'm assuming the second book is going to be more about him. The third book is called Titus Alone, so yeah, I think he's going to be the main character. The writing in this was really beautiful. Like for this sort of fantasy book, it was like incredibly descriptive, and you were introduced to each character so slowly to the point where I found the pacing a little bit odd. Like you were spending sometimes 50 pages on one scene. It was quite humorous at points, but ultimately it was a bit of a slog. I think just because the writing was really dense. So I didn't. When I bought this, I was going to buy all three in the one book, and I'm sort of glad I didn't, because I think the writing was tiny, because the book didn't, like, this is quite a big book, and the one that had all three didn't look that much bigger. But the other thing that's putting me off picking this up is that I've heard, again, I know that Jess from Sunbeams, Jess read this, and she really liked the second one, but she didn't like the third one so much, and that puts me off picking up the rest of the series when it's going to go downhill, potentially. But I think I will give the second one a go at some point. It's just not really a high priority for me right now. I read this one like 2 or 3 years ago, and I've not picked up the second one since, so we'll see. The next one I mentioned in another video is Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, and this is the first book in the Dark Star trilogy, and I think the third book is due to come out this year, so there are only 2 books out right now for this. This is again quite like a high fantasy book, which is not really my thing, but I really like Marlon James's writing, which is why I picked this one up. This is set in Africa, and it's very much based on African mythology, which I really liked as a concept. I can't really remember the plot too much. It's something about finding the heir to a kingdom, and there are these 2 hunters that go out to try and find them, and it got quite confusing. I did, like, when I was reading it at the time, I fully understood what was going on. I've just forgotten a little bit now. I know that the second book, Marlon James has said that you can read them in either order, and that you'll get something different from it depending on which order you read it in. So the second book is told from the witch's perspective in this, and it's sort of about her childhood growing up, whereas this one is told from the point of view of Tracker, who is the leopard. Or the wolf. I think he's a leopard. So yeah, I will probably pick the second one up. I just need to be in the right mood for it, and then I would like to reread this one, so maybe it'd be better to read the second one next and then reread this one after. Now that the third one's coming out, I feel like I can do that and then pick up the third one soonish, because I don't really want to have another big break. The next one is sort of a loose trilogy, I think, and I think most people only read the first one, and that's Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This is part of the African trilogy, and the next one is called Arrow of God, I think. I really like this book. This is about Okonkwo, who is sort of like the most important man in this very traditional tribal village in Africa. It's meant to be Nigeria, I think. Chinua Achebe is a Nigerian author. This is like very much a classic. I remember one of the other classes when I was at school were reading this book as part of the syllabus. It's that sort of classic read. I really enjoyed it. I would like to read more of Chinua Achebe's writing, so if anyone has read either the next book in the trilogy or another book by him, let me know where to go next, because yeah, I don't really feel like I would need to pick up the rest of this trilogy, but I would like to read more of his writing. The next is The Buru Quartet by Pramodia Anantator. I read this one quite recently. I read it back in February, and I liked it okay. He is a Javanese author, and this is very much about Dutch colonial rule in Indonesia and sort of the injustices. It's also a bit of a love story. It seems like the next book will continue directly on from this, so I would like to pick this one up. I just didn't fall in love with this first book as much as I thought I was going to. Again, if I'm going to continue on the series, I would rather do it sooner than later, because I'm probably going to forget some details, but at the moment I'm not feeling like super motivated to pick up the next one, so yeah, unsure about this one as well. One where I really liked the first book, but when I read it I didn't even know that this was going to turn into I think it's just a duology. Like, I didn't know that he was planning to write another book, so I didn't know I was getting myself into a series, and that's The Sympathizer by Viet, Thanh, Nguyen. I really like this book. This is about very much about the Vietnam War. He's sort of meant to be a double agent in it. It's quite action-packed. It's very much a satire of the American idea of Vietnam, and yeah, I really liked it, but I didn't realise that he was planning to write another one. I can't remember the name of the other one. I will put it up. But yeah, like, I did really like his writing. I just like don't know if I need more of this. Like, I enjoyed this and I feel like that's enough. So yeah, unsure. The next one, again, like, I don't really know if this is a series, but the two books, it's sort of like two memoirs, I guess, could go together, and that's The Outrun and The Instant by Amy Liptrot. And I read The Instant, which is the second one, which is about Amy Liptrot's time moving to Berlin and sort of like life in a big city. It's very much about nature. She goes bird watching and sort of discovers the city's wildlife. The first book is about her going back to Orkney after her like alcohol addiction and trying to restart her life. So I would like to read the first one so that I can really appreciate the second one a bit more. I really liked this book. It was quite touching, and yeah, I'd like to go back and see where it started. The next one is, again, I think I've read the last book in this because I didn't realise that it was part of a trilogy. Again, I don't really think you need to read all of these books. Like, I managed to read the third one and didn't even realise it was part of a trilogy, but that's The Rat by Murakami. So I have read A Wild Sheep's Chase, which I think is the last one. I'll put the names up of the first two because I honestly can't remember, but these are sort of older Murakami books, and I really liked A Wild Sheep's Chase. It was very magical realist. I don't know what links these books together at all. Like, I don't know if it's characters or if it's like place or theme. I'm not sure, but I do really like Murakami, so like I will probably pick these up at some point. But yeah, like, I don't really think that you need to read them as a series. It was just interesting when I found out that this was part of a series. I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that. Another book that I didn't realise was a series is Sunset Song by Lewis Grassic Gibbon. This is like a Scottish classic. I read this quite recently. This is a book about Chris Guthrie, who is a young girl growing up in rural Scotland, sort of set in Aberdeenshire. A lot of this book was like, the language is quite difficult. Obviously, I'm Scottish, but I'm not from that part of Scotland. This is told in the sort of Doric dialect. There is a glossary at the back, which was very helpful. Because even my boyfriend is from Aberdeenshire, and I was reading some of the words out to him, and he was like, I have no idea. Like, his dad knew it all, but he didn't. So yeah, it's sort of set in the early 20th century, so it's obviously older language as well. This was quite a bleak book as well. It's very much about like this woman growing up in this very rural, isolated farming community, and then World War I strikes, and how that sort of decimates the town even more than it was before. Yeah, didn't realise this was part of a series. There are only 3 books in this, but yeah, like, I have no real desire to pick up the next one. I did like this book, but yeah, I don't really feel like I need more from it, so I might at some point, but unsure. The next is the Living Autobiography series by Deborah Levy. I think this is the second one. This is The Cost of Living, and this is about her sort of getting her life back on track after her divorce. The first one I think deals with her childhood, and then the third one is more about her life as a writer. This one is very short, like it's about 150, 180 pages. I liked it at the time. I can't remember too much from it though. I like Deborah Levy's writing-ish. I like some of Deborah Levy's writing. I really liked Hot Milk. I liked Swimming Home a lot less. This I did enjoy, but it's not really stuck with me. So I don't really feel any huge desire to pick up the rest of the series. But like, if either of the other books are really good, do please let me know, because I'm not averse to it. Next is a book that I took out of the library, which is My Name is Lucy Barton, which is the first book in the Amgash series by Elizabeth Strout. I think there are 4 of these, or maybe more. This book was fine. It's very short. It sort of is this woman reflecting on certain parts of her life. It's also quite bleak at points. It seems like she had a very difficult upbringing. I know that I think the 3rd book in this series, O William, was nominated for the Booker Prize a couple of years ago, so I know a lot of people picked it up because of that. Again, I think this is quite a loose series. It's just characters that are the same throughout, so you don't have to read them all. But yeah, like, I liked it okay, but again, like, no real desire to pick the rest up. So again, if anyone has read the rest of the series and like really recommends a particular book, then do let me know. Yeah, now we're getting onto book series that I'm probably not going to finish. I'm not going to be honest. First is the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. I read Annihilation. This is very much not my sort of thing. So again, like, when I was reading it, I was like, this is out of my comfort zone. I know a lot of people like absolutely love this book. It was made into a film. I just like didn't really get very much from it. It's quite creepy. It's about this biologist who's going into Area X with a group of sort of 4 other women, and they're going to discover what's out there. You know, it's science fiction. It gets a bit spooky, but at the end I was like, meh, didn't really care that much. I'm probably not going to continue it. Next is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Again, I know a lot of people love this, and I think that was a problem. So going into it, my expectations were very, very high, but it's not really the sort of thing that I read. I don't really read any fantasy. This is about a world where there's a 5th season essentially, and the 5th season causes a lot of problems for people, and there are these people who can control the earth, and they are very necessary in the 5th season. I read this quite a while ago, so that's like a very, very loose summary. And yeah, I've only read the first book. It was fine. It was a bit too fast-paced for my liking. I found the language a bit sparse, a bit uninteresting. I wasn't hugely invested in it. Now quite a few years have passed, so I'm quite unlikely to pick the next one up. I also picked up the first book in the Detective Kosuke Kindaichi series, which again, didn't really realise it was a series, and that's the Honjin Murders. I took this book out of the library last year. Again, it's not really my sort of thing. I was in a bit of a reading slump, and sometimes I find like a sort of mystery book helps me get out of the reading slump. It's quite compulsive. This one was fine, but there are apparently 34 books in this series. I guess it's like the Japanese version of like Agatha Christie, so yeah, like I don't think you need to read them all. I think you can pick and choose which ones you read. I didn't mind it. Like, I would maybe read another book in the series if I was like, again, in a reading slump, but it's not really my thing, and I have no real desire to pick any more up at the moment. The next is a book that I read earlier this year, and that I read Queen Lucia, which is from the Map and Lucia series. There are like 12 books in this series, and it's written in the early 1900s, and it's like about a very small village in England. The first book just had Lucia, didn't have Map, so I don't know who Map is as a character. I'm assuming they come into it in the next book. Lucia is like the queen bee of the village, and it's sort of about her trying to make sure that she stays on top. I listened to it as an audiobook, which was quite a good idea because there are quite a lot of characters and quite a lot of different voices. Again, I found it fine, like it was okay, but I have no real desire to like read another 11 books from that series. The next one, there's a theme here. As soon as I pick up any book that's sort of out with my comfort zone, it doesn't go well normally. The next one is Vita Nostra by Sergei and Maria Duschenko. I'll put it up here. I can't remember if that's how you say their names. This is again like a fantasy book. This is like a magic school type of book. Not really my sort of thing. Didn't really love the writing. I thought the ideas were quite interesting in it. It was a lot about playing with time. this is going to be a quartet, but only the first two have been translated into English. They're Ukrainian authors, and I now believe that they were a married couple, but one of them sadly died, I think, last year, so I'm not sure if all of the books have already been written. But yeah, probably not going to read more in this. I didn't really love it, so. So the next is the Inspector Alan Grant series. I accidentally read the 5th book in this series, which was great, because I'd heard people talking about it and I just assumed it was the first book. This, I think, is an outlier from the rest of the series, so it's about this inspector who, I'm assuming in one of the previous books, has been injured and he's in hospital and he's very bored. So his secretary brings him in some stuff to try and amuse him, and one of them is a picture of Richard III, and it gets him really interested in the story about Richard III and how he's meant to be seen as this murderer, and is he really, essentially. I kind of like knew the history of this, so I think you're maybe meant to, but I was a bit confused because I was like, I know what happened, so why are you telling me all of this? It was like as if he didn't know, but then at the end it says, oh, everyone's known this for 150 years, so I was like, okay, so maybe, I'm not sure. I think the rest of the books in this series are more just like straightforward detective narratives. It's not really my sort of thing. It was also written in the 50s. I'm not sure how well it's going to have aged. He seems like a sort of grumpy male detective. I'm just not that interested. The next one I picked up because it was such a beautiful book that I think everyone was reading it at the time, and that's Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Again, when I read this book, I had no idea that it was going to be a series, and there are now 5 of them, I think, or at least there are going to be 5 of them. This is a book about a cafe where you go back in time, or you can like go back or forward in time to visit people that you've maybe lost, or people that you want to speak to. This book was a bit too earnest for me, like the tone I found very like emotional. It's just, yeah, again, I don't really read any of that sort of like speculative type thing. I think like I don't really like what they call like cozy fantasy, which I guess is maybe fits into because it's like about a little cute cafe in a station in Tokyo. Yeah, I'm not going to read the rest of these. I have no real interest. And then the last one, like I read the first 2 books of this years and years ago. I doubt I'm going to pick up the 3rd one. It's the Mad Adam series by Margaret Atwood. I've read Orcs and Crake and The Year of the Flood. This is sort of a post-apocalyptic type series. Details have very much faded from my mind. I quite liked Orcs and Crake. I didn't really like The Year of the Flood as much, and yeah, now, as I say, the details have faded. I would need to reread these if I was going to continue with the series, which I very much doubt I'm going to do. So yeah, I'm probably just going to say goodbye to this series. So yeah, I'm like very, very surprised at how many books I've read in series and that I've not finished. Because I would say that I'm someone that mainly reads sort of more literary fiction or classics. I read a lot of memoir, sort of books that aren't really classically books that you would think of as a series. I'd say out of the 28 series, there are probably like 18 series that I would continue, or at least consider continuing at some point. So like that's pretty good, and I guess it's quite nice having a series because it's guess comforting that you roughly know what you're getting into. Sometimes if you pick up a brand new book, it takes a bit of brain power to work out exactly what's going on and get into it, whereas in a series you can get into it a lot quicker. So yeah, I will be prioritising some of these books for sure, and there are some new series that I do want to start as well, so we'll make a separate video about that. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed me talking about all my series, and yeah, subscribe if you'd like more.